Hello to all of you viewers of The Pioneer. I hope you're all healthy and well. As the Pioneer team, we continue to bring you the latest developments and incredible details about the Russian-Ukrainian war. In a moment, we are going to share a very interesting true story of courage and survival. This video will tell the story of how a Ukrainian soldier, a man full of hope and determination, escaped from Russian soldiers in the middle of the war. This story is a symbol not only of a soldier's struggle for survival, but also of his will to fight and his desire to be reunited with his loved ones. Let's dive into the details of this incredible escape and find out what our hero went through. Before moving on to our report, here's a small reminder. As the Pioneer team, we strive to convey to you the developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. I also read all the comments you leave on our videos. Please continue to share your ideas about our content. Tell us in the comments what content you would like to see on the Pioneer channel. And now let's start if you're ready. The Pioneer reports. In the early hours of the morning recently, as the first rays of the sun were just peeking over the horizon, Ukrainian soldier Sergei's eyes slowly opened. He awoke to find himself in a cold, damp room. His hands and feet were bound with chains. As soon as he recovered from the initial shock of his capture, he tried to remember how long he had been here, but he had lost all sense of time. He was taken to the headquarters of the Russian soldiers where he was interrogated. There was only one way out for him, to find a weak spot and escape. Sergei observed his surroundings for days in the captivity of the Russian soldiers. He made mental notes of the movements of the soldiers under surveillance, the shift changes and the weak points of the headquarters. He had already practiced lockpicking techniques he had seen on social media and had achieved a certain level of competence. It had never crossed his mind that the videos he had watched for fun before the war started would be of such use. But the time had come to apply these techniques in the video. One night, taking advantage of the absent-mindedness of the soldier on duty, he managed to unchain himself. His heart was beating wildly in his chest as he quietly left the room. He held his breath as he moved through the corridors, afraid that at any moment someone would notice him. As it is well known, the main problem in the Russian armed forces is inexperienced soldiers. The Russian army is constantly recruiting new soldiers to make up for the shortage, and most of the soldiers serving in the Russian army are very inexperienced. They are also brought to the battlefield by force, so they intentionally do not care about their work. That night, Sergei was lucky, because the soldiers on guard duty that night were extremely careless. Sergei peered out of a small window at the back of the headquarters. As the cold air hit his face, he got his first taste of freedom. But now the real struggle began. As he made his way through the desolate forest, he listened carefully for footsteps, hiding at the slightest crunch. For days he went hungry and thirsty, but he never stopped. The only thing that kept him alive was his desire to be reunited with his loved ones. Finally, Sergei reached the Ukrainian border. He was exhausted but full of triumph. When he crossed the border, he could not hold back his tears. This escape was a victory not only for him, but for all those who had not lost hope in the midst of war. Sergei's story showed how, with a soldier's determination and courage, the seemingly impossible can become possible. But it was still not over, because even when he crossed the border into Ukraine, he was still in Russian-occupied territory. His adventure was in full swing. Sergei's moment of freedom was short-lived because he still had some distance to cover. When he crossed the Ukrainian border, thinking he was safe, he slowed his pace and sat down in the shade of a tree to rest. But the silence around him was deceptive. Within hours, a patrol of Russian soldiers had unwittingly begun to track Sergei. The tracks he had left behind as he made his way through the forest had led them in the right direction. Sergei, resting, was unaware that the patrol was approaching. After a while, Sergei was startled by an instinctive feeling that the patrol was near him without him realizing it. The faint sound of footsteps and the click of weapons forced him to be alert again. He stood up quietly and dived into the nearest bushes. As he tried to move forward, holding his breath, he suddenly heard a soldier's voice. The Russian patrol was very close, and Sergei's heart began to race again. He had to think fast. Getting caught would mean the end. As Sergei continued to move silently and carefully, he began to formulate a plan. First, he needed to distract the soldiers. He threw a twig through the bushes near a pile of stones some distance away. The sound attracted the attention of the soldiers, and they all started moving in that direction. This bought Sergei some time, but not enough. He decided to move deeper into the forest, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to escape without leaving a trace. At one point, Sergei saw a Russian soldier appear in front of him. Looking for a place to hide, he took refuge in a small cave nearby. The soldiers continued to track Sergei, and the danger grew with each passing minute. Holding his breath, he moved deeper into the cave, hiding there and waiting for the soldiers to pass. With his heart pounding in his chest, Sergei waited a while longer when he heard the soldiers moving away. And then he quietly left the cave and started running again. It reminded him once again that even a moment of carelessness in the heat of battle could cost him his life. When Sergei came out of the cave, he knew that the danger had not completely passed. He wasn't sure if he would be able to track down the Russian soldiers, but even the slightest trace could lead them to come after him again. So he kept moving forward, careful not to leave a trace. His steps were silent, paying attention to every rustle of leaves. As tired and hungry as he was, he could not afford to stop. After a while, Sergei heard the sound of a river in the distance. It gave him both hope and fear. The river would be the perfect way to erase his tracks, but it also carried a remarkable danger. He decided to make his way to the river, and as soon as he reached the water, he let himself be swept away by its current. The water both relieved his fatigue and erased his tracks. But even in the water, he had to be careful. The slightest movement on the surface could give away his presence. The current of the river carried him for kilometers. When he reached the riverbank, he hoped that he was out of the reach of the Russian soldiers. But he knew he still had to be careful. Once out of the river, he kept moving forward, using the vegetation around him. He was always alert. Every rustle of a bush, every snap of a twig could complicate his escape. He kept silent as he moved through the forest, gathering all his energy to reach his destination. Sergei met a group of soldiers at the end of the road. He was scared again, because this time the soldiers had seen him too. For a moment, he thought he was going to die, but there was a beam of color that caught his eye. The yellow-blue colors of the Ukrainian flag winked at Sergei. Sergei had made it. These soldiers were his friends. When Sergei saw them, he shouted with all his might, "Glory to Ukraine!" What do you think? How do you think the story of the Ukrainian soldier Sergei will affect the other Ukrainian soldiers in captivity? What do you think about the Russian army's failure to protect its prisoners? We care about your opinions, so please share them with us.